Good morning all, good to see you all. Really excited about today. Sports journalism heavy day in the media festival, and we're going to kick off with a familiar face you'll probably recognise from Football Focus, from ITV Sport and their coverage at the last Euros. He's now a filmmaker, represents Yaya Toure, which I'm sure he's going to talk about a little bit. Delighted to have Leon Mann here today.
Cheers.
Also, should say, BComs, we're going to hear a lot about that too.
Yep.
Leon, over to you. Thank you.
Cheers. Thank you, everyone. First of all, can you all hear me? Yeah. Awesome. Right, I don't need to speak into the microphone. That's all good. Right, so I've got this presentation, and essentially what I'm going to do is take you through my journey, which is an unusual one into sports media. Tell you a bit about what I've done and where I've ended up, which is not a traditional place necessarily, although I've come through some very traditional outlets such as BBC Sport and also ITV Sport. First of all, you might notice, welcome to the future, the hashtag there. Some people think it's a bit arrogant. I remember speaking to James Pearce about this with Dan Rowan. I don't know if you're familiar with those two journalists, very well-known sports news journalists. I think he was saying, Leon, you're the future. I think he was saying, who's it? Dan Rowan, you know, you're the present. And James Pearce was very, very, I don't know, derogatory towards himself, I guess, in saying, and I'm the past, which is not the case, because they were all fantastic journalists, but we all do things in different kinds of ways. So I'll talk you through why I've got that Welcome to the Future hashtag, why I still have it on my Twitter account and on my social media. So who am I? All right, okay. Hold on, there's a lot here. So I'm an interviewer, BBC Sport and ITV Sport mainly. I'm a consultant, so I work with some big athletes and also sports authorities. I'm a filmmaker. I've made some films on Usain Bolt and been involved in films on Jermaine Defoe and Andy Cole. And I'm a campaigner. That's where my sports industry journey began, essentially, working and founding BComs, the Black Collective of Media and Sport, the Football Blacklist, and also the Sports People's Think Tank. So I'll tell you more about those within this presentation. So I thought the easiest way to kick off, because not everyone knows who I am, is to show you my show reel. It's a little bit old, but hopefully it will give you a flavour of some of the work I've done in broadcasting.
Every day. This will probably be the toughest question for you to prepare. If you don't win this 100 meters, who would you like to see win it personally?
A very open Neon here. What did you make of all that? All that hard work, all that graft, ended like that. Can you take any positives from this experience at all?
No, none whatsoever. I feel like I've let myself down a bit. I feel like I've let my coaches down. I've let everybody I've ever trained with down. I've let my mum and dad and my brother down.
It's as high as it goes on the laptop.
I'm sure the people you just mentioned don't feel that way. But is this the end for you?
I don't know if it's the end of my judo competitive career, but it probably is the end of my Olympic Games career, and it's certainly the end of my Olympic Games this time around.
And this is where the man from Anguilla trains, on the Usain Bolt track, with Usain Bolt's coaches, and often alongside the big man himself.
Okay, so apologies for the sound issues there. It was a little bit low, but hopefully you kind of get a flavour of some of the work that I've done across my career in broadcasting to date. Now, I put this slide up because sometimes I do these talks and people sit there and go, oh, how would I ever achieve those things? Well, actually, my first taste of the sports industry was as a steward. So it's a lot, well, I'm a lot younger in this picture, as you can see. But here I am in the World Cup final, 1999 World Cup final, Australia versus Pakistan. And my job was to run onto the pitch, because I was pretty quick back then, grab the bails, run off, and then make sure that no one nicked them, essentially. So I had a real, it was a fantastic job. I'd go back and do it tomorrow if anyone offered it to me. But it was a real kind of like basic job. Essentially, I was in charge of a lift. It was a VIP lift, so it was great. You got to meet some fantastic cricketers. But essentially, I was working in a lift, not watching much of the cricket, and running on at the end of the game to grab some bails. So that was my first taste of the sports industry. I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself in terms of my background, where I'm from, etc. I'm from a place called Haringey in London. I don't know if there are any Londoners in the room by any chance? Yep, do you know Haringey? Yep, Haringey Green Lanes. They've got Foxtons there now. They never used to when I was growing up. It was a very, I don't know, ordinary area, I would call it. Some people might call it an urban area. Had some challenges. I, as an individual, was obsessed with sport, wanted to play football for Tottenham Hotspur. Wanted to play cricket for Worcestershire. Sorry, that's my dad's county. I was told not to mention it, but I believe you won the varsity yesterday, so I'm on safe territory today. Dreamed of writing or broadcasting, but actually I never felt that was possible. I never felt it was possible because at that time, I mean, we're talking like the 90s, I didn't see anyone who looked like me who was involved in the sports media. And if I did see someone, like a Garth Crooks, for example, they'd played hundreds of games at the top level. So for a young black person, I didn't have someone to follow in their footsteps, to work towards. And for me, that was a big thing, and that's kind of influenced some of the work that I'll go on to tell you about a bit later on. Got decent GCSEs, but completely fluffed my A-levels. Completely fluffed my A-levels. Just wasn't focused, quite frankly. But I was very fortunate, got to spend some time in Kenya, a kid from inner city London going out to the Great Rift Valley in Kenya where I had to sleep for about 5 weeks to just be able to like handle the environment there. I mean, seriously, the altitude is incredible in terms of what it does to your lungs. But it was a life-changing experience, opened my eyes to the world in a way that I'm eternally grateful for, and helped me kind of focus on what I wanted to achieve in life and to actually gain a gratitude for everything that came into my life when you see people with absolutely nothing. So that was a big moment for me. I got a geography degree. So everyone in this room, you are well ahead of me in the sports media journey. I had a geography degree because it was pretty much the only decent A-level I got. And actually did enjoy geography for 2 of the 3 years, during my degree at least. I found the third year was a little bit too much for me. But anyway, off the back of getting that degree, I volunteered for a campaign called Kick It Out. Any hands up? Everyone know what Kick It Out is? Excellent, yep. The slogan at the time was Kick Racism Out of Football. They've evolved into an anti-discrimination campaign now. And I volunteered there. I was very fortunate that my parents were able to support me so I could volunteer there. Volunteered for 3 months, I think. And then a job came up that I had absolutely no right to get. Which was head of media. I know it sounds very posh, but there was only about 4 people working for Kick It Out at the time. So head of media basically meant the media person. And I was very fortunate to get that at a much lower pay grade than was advertised and work my way up. But that was my first step into the media industry in terms of a formal job. And it was absolutely incredible because in that job, in a small team, you are speaking to every single journalist in the media. They are calling you for stories, they're calling you, you're calling them to help with your campaigning, and you're developing relationships. So I left Kick It Out with an incredible network of journalists, an incredible insight into journalism, and that helped me to gain a belief that I could become a sports journalist. So being around people like Darren Lewis, a fantastic sports journalist, who I'm sure David will know very, very, very well at the Daily Mirror, seeing people like Rodney Hines at the Voice newspaper. Suddenly those people that I didn't feel were visible, didn't see them, when I was young, those black sports journalists were visible, and I was talking to them, and I was getting advice directly from them, being in a very privileged position. So I'm in at Kick It Out. Then for me, it's about getting noticed. Because it's such a small team, I was the spokesperson, or a spokesperson for the campaign at 22. So while my mates were just starting off on their journeys and their workplaces, they were picking up the Mirror or the Sun or watching Sky Sports News and seeing my name, which was like incredible to them, incredible to me. You know, in terms of our messaging, it's quite simple. You know, if a racist incident had happened, what was the messaging likely to be other than racism is bad, let's do something about it? So actually, I became comfortable and familiar with the media through that. I became comfortable on camera as a result of being a campaigner. But I had always wanted to be a sports journalist. You know, I was the kid who was playing football at 11, writing match reports that would be seen by nobody, where I'd give everyone ratings on how they played in the team, write the formations, how it changed at half-time. I didn't see that at the time as an interest in sports journalism. I just saw it as something that I did, this kind of weird hobby that I wouldn't share with anybody. But actually that was, looking back, you know, an indication that I was really keen on sports media. But anyway, a fantastic woman called Shelley Alexander had seen my interviews. She had got to know me. I had made some films or worked on the behalf of Kick It Out with the BBC on some films that they made for the campaign. And she said, look, you've got a bit of a talent. Have you never thought about getting into the sports media? And for me, I told her my story and she goes, well, look, you know, there is a way in, but it's going to mean taking a step back in your career almost to an entry-level job at the BBC. So at this point, I was 27 years old, and I was going to do a job that was essentially designed for a 21, 22-year-old. So for me, it was a big moment in my life because I kind of had to make a decision of, well, do I go for my dream or do I kind of sit comfortably in a communications job where I could maybe go on to be director of communications at a football club one day if I'm very, very lucky. So anyway, I took a gamble. Fortunately, my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, was very supportive of me as well. She had a very good job. She's a sports writer at The Guardian at the time. She's now at The Telegraph. And I went for it. And this broadcast assistant job was an eye-opener because the shifts, it was in sports news. So when you're watching BBC Breakfast in the morning, just remember someone's got to come in to make that show. And I was one of the people involved in the sports side of things. So those graphics, just those pictures that you see, I was the guy going in. Back then, it wasn't digital. I had to get a tape and record all the sport that was going on across all the channels. It was really, really hard work. Getting up at 4 in the morning, getting my taxi at 4:30, getting in when there was nobody there. But actually seeing how television was made, being a part of it, I would feel so proud to see my graphic. I would feel so proud to see my graphic. When I got it wrong, not so much, particularly when I got the scores wrong. I needed that on a couple of occasions, and I don't think anyone noticed. But for me, it was a huge, huge, huge breakthrough. But it wasn't my dream. And at 27, it certainly wasn't the thing that was getting me out of bed in the morning in terms of where I was trying to go to. So for me, I developed a strategy. If I wasn't going to be able to go to press conferences for the BBC, if I wasn't going to be able to make films for the BBC at that point, I needed to find an outlet that I could do those things for. So I approached Rodney Hines from the Voice newspaper, which is the African Caribbean newspaper in the UK, very respected newspaper. Went there and said, look, I've got this contact book. I've got loads of people, Rio Ferdinand, Michael Richards was a big player at the time. Can I do some stuff with you? And because I knew Rodney really well, he was like, yeah, of course, yeah. Well, what do you want to do? I was like, well, can I go and do some interviews? Can I write some stories on sports politics? Because I've got an interest in that. He was like, well, look, yeah, absolutely, no problem. So I'd start my shift at about 5 a.m. at the BBC, finish it about 2, and then I'd go off and I'd become the journalist I wanted to be for the Voice newspaper. And I was very fortunate to have that platform that was there for me. So I ended up doing some incredible things. So one of the main things I did was I actually ended up going to Nigeria with Rio Ferdinand. So Rio's a friend of mine. He was going to Nigeria, I think this was like 2008 or so. And I ended up going there with him and, writing this double-page spread, for the Voice newspaper. And one of the things I would always do when I do a piece for the Voice is I'd come in and I kind of tactfully leave it near the bosses so that they could see that I was getting interviews. And all of a sudden they started saying to me, well, hang on, Leon, you're doing these interviews, Why don't you do them for us? Could you organise them for us? I said, well, I could organise them for you, but I'd like to do it myself. And that is seen as a real bold step, because actually in any industry you're in, you're kind of seen as, you know, keeping to your rank, if you like. Whereas I kind of felt, well, I understand that, but I want to do these interviews. And I want to do these interviews because I believe I do them in a different way to the journalists that you have here now. I was younger, I know 27, it doesn't sound young, but in the sports media, it is young. I was a young black kid, I was an inner city kid. I felt I brought a different tone. I thought I approached those interviews with a different angle, and I thought I could get the sports news lines that they wanted, but a load of other stuff. And I believed I could build relationships with the people that I was interviewing because they would like the stuff that I do. Now, my job was not to promote them, but actually, a lot of athletes turn off from what they see in the newspapers because actually it's not what they feel is representative of them all the time. We've seen that with Raheem Sterling, and there's a big conversation around diversity in the sports media at the moment. I think the boom of online has ensured that there is more space, and certainly social media, to actually see what players are like and give them a platform that they can control themselves so we can see a bit of what they want to show us. But my vision was I have a space in this industry that I don't believe is being filled. So, so I started doing some cool stuff. And then all of a sudden there was a job that came up, assistant producer. This was like seen as a big, big job in the department. On paper, I'd only been around for 6 months. So I should have had absolutely no chance of getting that job, being completely honest. However, the way the gods work, we had that department had a shift in the technology that it was using. It went from using a program called Avid, you guys familiar with Avid, the editing kit, to, what was it called? Final Cut Pro. So it went from that to that. So everyone was, all of a sudden, overnight, in terms of the technical skills you need for the job, on a level playing field. So I was in the right place at the right time. So I was technically the same as everybody else. Journalistically, I'd proven through my work with The Voice that I was, journalistically sharp enough to do the role. And the thing that made me stand out is my contact book was by far better than anyone else I was competing for that job. In fact, it was up against, it was actually seen in the department as your contact book is as good as our paid correspondents and reporters. So because I was in that position, I got the job. It went down well with some in the department, but for others who've been waiting for, literally 5-10 years for that move up, I think they were, understandably disappointed. So it created a bit of a dynamic in the newsroom. However, I think everyone kind of understood, and hopefully have seen what I've gone on to do has proven that that was the right decision at the right time. You don't necessarily give a job to someone because they've been there for a long time, and that's not talking down their abilities, but in terms of what I brought to the table, in terms of what you guys can bring to the table, and this is why I'm telling you to think about what you bring to the table when you step into these situations, it was valued. Right, so I'm in the door, so how do I get established? I don't want to just be another person who's on the treadmill coming in, day out. Well, it's funny how it works. Your background can really help you with certain things. Half my family are Jamaican. And they were like, oh, Leon, why don't you come to Jamaica to do a piece on Usain Bolt? This is like 2008, you just smashed it in Beijing. I was like, yeah, but it doesn't really work like that, does it? You don't just turn up in Jamaica and just do a piece on Usain Bolt. No, I just live around the corner. Yeah, you can just knock on his door. It's like, I'm not sure I can. I'm not sure I can do that. Anyway, so we looked into various links, and I'd made some contact with the people from his camp who were based in Jamaica. A lot of journalists don't do that. They would just go solely to the agent who is based here in the UK, but I got creative because of my background, and managed to work an opportunity with Usain Bolt. Now, the IAAF were also organising a trip at the same time. So they kind of married up together. And I ended up going out there, and one of the most senior sports news producers at the time, fantastic guy, who's always seemed really grumpy, but I think he was just like really kind of, he wanted his work to be the best. He wanted the department's work to be the best, so he was constantly in this place of frustration. When I got back from that trip, he said, Leon, these are the best rushes we have ever seen as part of sports news. What do we have from Usain Bolt? In a dream scenario, what would you want? We had him in a nightclub, 3 bottles of Guinness in each hand, dancing away. We had him up in the hills in Trelawney, mum and dad's place. We had him on the track. It was just magnificent. It was fantastic. So we put together a fantastic piece. At the time, I wasn't seen as senior enough to front the piece, but I insisted. I said, look, there's certain things I believe will make this piece work really well. One is using a local cameraman, because if you use a local cameraman or woman, they will know that environment well. They will probably, Jamaica's such a small place, they'll be working with Usain Bolt from he was like 11 years old. So they will know him, so they will get access. If we bring our own cameraman, this is going to be a stranger. This is going to be someone who there is no trust with. And I said, equally, we should be using someone who has an understanding of Jamaican culture. Because when they sit opposite Usain Bolt, the way to get the most from a young person who is still unfamiliar with the international media is to get someone who can get the best from them, an understanding of that culture. So I fought for those things, and we got a fantastic piece out of it. It was a brilliant, brilliant piece I'm really, really proud to produce. Off the back of that, I was king in the BBC. I was the Mr. Usain Bolt contact. I delivered. So they said, oh, right, do you fancy making a film on him? I was like, what, me? Make a film? Where's it going to go? Right, well, BBC Two are really keen. I was like, oh, okay. I've never made a film, but I'd love to make a film. So I got this opportunity, this incredible opportunity to make a film for BBC Two on Usain Bolt, fronted by Michael Johnson. Can you believe it? Like, the 2 biggest legends in athletics ever. So we made this film. It was really cool. I worked alongside, because I was junior, and I had to understand that, I worked alongside a producer called Stephen Lyle, who went on to become head of sport at Channel 4. He's currently head of cricket and the iPlayer at BBC Sport at the moment. Great guy, black guy, who's got Jamaican parentage as well. So it worked well. We had this dream team in terms of like what I brought to the table, what he brought to the table. We made this film, and to this day I'm so proud because it is the only sports documentary the BBC have made to be shown on BBC Two, BBC One and BBC Three. Now, it's incredibly hard to serve all of those different audiences, but we managed to do it. We managed to do it because we hit the scientific side of things for that BBC Two audience. It was mainstream because Usain Bolt is mainstream, but we also managed to make it feel young as well, so it actually hit that BBC Three audience. Things you should think about when you're making films, when you're making VTs and packaging, whatever your role is. If you want to be a camera person, if you want to be a reporter, if you're going to be a producer, director, think about these things. Think about these things in terms of how this story is being told and the audiences you're trying to serve. So anyway, I'd had enough of being behind the camera. I wanted in on the action. I wanted some of the fame. And also I had a frustration. I was like, oh God, I'm watching these guys turn up to do these interviews. And I just think we can do it in a different way. And also some of the frustrations I had was, we're not using online properly. We go and do these interviews all the time with these professional footballers. We speak to them for 15 minutes. You will see on Football Focus, Match of the Day, maybe 2 minutes 30 is the normal duration for a VT. What happens to all the other stuff? We just chuck it out. Well, we've got a whole website which is just like waiting there for people to see, and I want people to see my work as an interviewer. So I started working with the guys on the website who were delighted that they had a reporter who wanted to put stuff on there, so I'd write a piece, I'd help to edit a longer version, and then I'd also be in the edit for the pieces that would go on Football Focus. I always had dreamed of being part of an Olympics team. The fact that we had London Olympics, it's my city, an Olympics. I was just blown away to be made a feature reporter for London 2012 Olympics. So I think I had something like 17 or 18 VTs across the Olympic period, which I was actually disappointed with. I wanted more, but I think that's because I was a young, ambitious guy. But I was delighted with what I put out. It was great to be part of the Olympics. It's amazing. Then I made a second film during that time as well, ahead of the Olympics. Can anyone beat Bolt? because we covered the angle of Usain's story to that stage. So how do we move this on? And actually BBC Three, because they liked the last film, the commissioner was Danny Cohen, who went on to be, DG of head of BBC Television for a short while, really forward-thinking guy, allowed us to go around the world interviewing all the people that could potentially beat Bolt. So it's just a great, great project. Then, after London 2012, for me, I had to make a personal decision in terms of where my life was going. The BBC had moved from London to Manchester. So do I move my life to Manchester, or do I kind of try and go solo as a freelancer? So I went freelance. And at that point, I started doing some work with ITV and others, and got involved in the Jermaine Defoe and Andy Cole life stories. I was an interviewer for both. I don't know if anyone saw those. For me, I love that kind of television. To have an hour to tell somebody's story properly, and to spend good time with them is a real honour and privilege that I was just delighted to be part of. I made both of them cry. And if you know Andy Cole don't cry. He's not that guy. People before the interview had said, Leon, Coley's can be a bit cold. And the truth of the matter is, as I found in the documentary, he's just a shy guy. You just get people in life are different, right? Some people are all big and bubbly extroverts, and other people are introverts. Andy suffered from the fact that he was an introvert with the media because he wouldn't engage with the media during his career. So because of that, it felt like there was a bit of a standoff. Even the fact that I'm calling him Andy, there's Andrew, that was a big story at the time. Is it Andy or Andrew? It seemed to be problematic. But the truth of the matter is, just a very shy person. But because we developed a relationship during that shoot, because he'd known of me before and we'd met a couple of times, he opened up and actually broke down during the interview when recalling a story about his father talking about the racism he had faced. His father's from Nottingham and he was working down the pits. He was a miner and he was one of the few black miners at the time. So he talked about the racism he had faced, about the struggle to kind of bring up the family. And he talked about that on a recent trip to Jamaica with Andy. And then Andy he trusted me enough with the cameras. We were in a freezing cold warehouse at the time. So it wasn't really a setting for someone to, talk openly. I wasn't happy with where we were. It looked great on camera, but actually in terms of an interview, you don't want to be in a freezing cold place where you're shivering. You want to be somewhere where you're nice and warm, you can feel relaxed. But actually, the directors got it right in terms of the look, but in terms of what we were delivering, it's slightly different. But he trusted me enough. One of my biggest things in broadcasting recently, I was England reporter when Gabriel Clark wasn't there. Gabriel Clark is fantastic, by the way. If you watch his interviews, if you watch his filmmaking, absolutely stunning. Absolutely stunning. If you're unfamiliar with Gabriel Clark, please go and look up his work because you will learn so much. Just the way he produces his work is magical. The way he knits archive together with the footage that he would have shot. The way I've been told he looks at every single shot that goes into a film. Now, a lot of reporters just don't really do that. Even some producers, they kind of sometimes leave it to the editor. Well, the shots. But actually, he will look at every single one. And that's why I will look at every single one as well, because I know he is the best. He is the best filmmaker. And that's someone who I kind of work in that field to try and get close to. But I was the ITV second reporter for the home nations at the Euro 2016 in France, which is fantastic. So it's very hard work. Oh my gosh. You're just in a little van driving around France, which is huge, by the way. Which is absolutely huge. I didn't realise how big France was until you're trying to drive from Bordeaux to Nice. And then you've got to get out, and then Ian Dowie's waiting there, kind of like, oh, why are you late? We've got to do an as live. I'm like, oh, geez, okay, cool. And then you've got loads of fans who have had a few drinks, shall we say, just hanging around. But yeah, fantastic highlights in my career. So yeah, here's just some imagery to kind of prove that I'm not lying. So this was with Craig Bellamy, great character, fantastic interviewee. He tells it how it is. You might not like him, but he tells it how it is. I like him a lot because he comes with that truth and honesty. That's something you don't always get in journalism. You're going to find that. Some people are so well trained, actually, you don't know if you're getting truth or not. And that's what this is all about. It's all about finding truth and giving that to our audiences. Again, I mentioned my relationship with Rio. Here is him pre-beard. He asked me to host his book launch. Again, I'm showing you this just to reflect the importance of relationships. Relationships with people in this industry are really, really important and will take you to places that no boss can get you into. I'm working with the best. God, I hate my pose here, and I hate the way I'm looking. I look like a right arrogant so-and-so. But I was just trying not to look starstruck. I was like, yeah, I'll do this every day. I'll do this every day, yeah. Hanging out with Usain Bolt and Michael Johnson. But I try not to do many pictures with the people that I'm working with because it feels unprofessional, quite frankly. It's become a thing now because of social media, so you kind of do it to promote your work. But I try not to have pictures with the talent because I think it creates a different dynamic. So as a piece of advice for you guys going into the industry, can I just say, if you're going to do a picture, do it right at the very end, like literally before you're about to say goodbye to them. Because I'm seeing people now, young journalists, who are doing this before they've done an interview. You are changing the dynamic of your interview at that point. So please, please, it's just my advice, you do what you want, but I would suggest you don't do it. Because once you create that dynamic of you being a fan with someone you've got to ask difficult questions for, searching questions, it ain't going to work. It ain't going to work in the same way. I've also got my own production company. I touched on it before. I've got I like to call it a portfolio career because it sounds posh, but I do lots of different things. That's basically what that means. So I've set up PFA TV, which I do with the Professional Footballers Association. All the filming internally I do for them through my production company. So here I am with Sir Alex Ferguson, lovely man. Got on very well with him for the short time that I had with him. And on the right-hand side, I think it's the right-hand side, yep, that's some geezer called Leon Mann, where my company provided the cameras and the editing for the FIFA Pro interviews. So when they have Player of the Year, my camera crew will be involved in delivering the interviews and the output that you'll see going out. So diversity, I touched on it earlier. The sports media has a real problem with a lack of diversity. There are very, very few black sports reporters at the highest level. And fortunately, that is beginning to change. We're beginning to see more people from diverse backgrounds getting involved in the sports media. But to give you an idea, to quantify the problem, we've done some research as part of BComs, which I'll tell you a bit more about in a second. But at the last World Cup, out of 63 journalists that were sent to cover the World Cup, there was just one black sports journalist. That was Darren Lewis from the Daily Mirror. There were 3 women from the 63 as well. Again, a massive underrepresentation. Now, no one is arguing against the need for more diversity. 10 years ago, I was having discussions where people were arguing about diversity and the need for it. Does it improve your product? Does it improve the storytelling? But now there is a huge willingness and a real drive to try and change the dynamic in the sports media to ensure that lots of different voices are part of what we're doing. You know, and that includes age diversity, LGBT, it includes gender, race, the lot. I mean, essentially, we want to have a melting pot of sports journalists to be able to bring a diversity of thought to the table. So we have a thoroughness in terms of our editorial processes and a thoroughness in terms of the issues we can cover as a sports media. Now, this isn't just the sports media, by the way. The sports industry has a lack of diversity. 1 in 3 professional footballers are black. How many chairmen do you think we've got? I'll answer it because I'll just speed it up. 1. And he's been there since 1989, which is a disgrace. I didn't know that until a few years ago. That's Ben Robinson at Burton Albion. Ben's been there for a long time. He's had 2 periods where he's been the chairman of the club, but he is the only black British chairman we've ever had. I'm getting the hurry up now. So why are we asking for more diversity? Yes, it's the right thing to do. Yes, we don't want people to be excluded from this industry, but absolutely it's about better business, as I've touched on. It's about better business, it's about better decision making, it's about more thorough decision making by having a diversity of thought. So BComs, Black Collective of Media in Sport, That's about networking, it's about mentoring, it's about lobbying the bosses, and it's about offering support to other people who are in minorities within the sports media. We've organised D-word conferences, the D-word being diversity. We've produced guides, of which I've got a couple with me, so I can leave a couple here, but it's also available digitally on the BCOM's website. And I've got Sports Journalism Association Committee at the bottom because I was asked and joined that and was very proud to join the Sports Journalism Committee in terms of adding some input to that important committee around diversity, inclusion and equality. And I'm very pleased to say the SJA are incredibly committed to trying to do as much as they can in this area. So here we are. Just again, I like the visuals. D-Word 3 conference at BT Sport. They have never, ever in the history of this studio, the largest TV studio for sport in Western Europe. They've never, ever had as many people in that studio as we had on that day. This is 300 people plus. I was told I was only allowed 270. We broke the rules. It's okay. Simon Green, the boss, let me off. It's for good reason. But they've never had that many people in there. That is the interest that there is from people right across the industry in this issue. These are some of the decision makers we've got great relationships with. So here we have Gary Lineker's bosses on the end, Philip Burney, and the guy in the glasses in the middle, Simon Green, who's the head of BT Sport, is the head of BBC Television Sport, Philip Burney. Next to him, Stephen Law, who I made the film with, head of sport at Channel 4 at the time. And at the end there, anyone watch Sky Sports News? Yeah, it's just rolling. It's just rolling, isn't it? It's just rolling. That is Andy Cairns, who's head of Sky Sports News. All people who have been engaged in this conversation for a while around diversity. Football Blacklist, I'm going to have to spin through really quickly. It is now sponsored by the Premier League in terms of our celebration. I talked about the lack of diversity. It's about highlighting black leaders in various areas. So from community to administration to the commercial area. Why do we do this? We do this so the young kid I talked about, being myself, looking to the media, didn't see representation. Well, actually, we're doing everything we can to highlight the representation that we have so people can aspire to be those people in the future, whatever the area. We have lots of players. You have an overrepresentation of the black community as players. Maybe that's because black people are seen as athletes. That would be an interesting piece to kind of review. Are black people seen as leaders? Are black people seen as top lawyers? Are black people seen as top people working and leading community groups? Those are the challenges that we have. So that's why we put this blacklist together. It's been running for 10 years now. It's made a real positive impact in terms of celebrating the people that we have in the community, but also pushing forward, offering the community those people to aspire to. So here we go. We've got Richard Scudamore, who's the outgoing executive chairman of the Premier League, has been at our celebrations. Andy Cole, who I mentioned before, Rodney Hines, DJ Spooney, Jason Roberts, one of my best mates in the game, and myself there, practicing my smile. And this Football Blacklist has just grown and grown. So we get 400 people at this event. We turn away loads. And this year, we are hoping to have 600 people at the celebration. And it will continue to grow and grow and grow. Corporate governance, I talked about the lack of diversity at the boardroom level. Yesterday, there was a graduation of a group of players who'd come through this corporate governance scheme that I was part of founding with Jason Roberts, Darren Moore, Michael Johnson and others. Basically, it's a corporate governance scheme that we set up that is funded by the PFA to get more black faces, more black people, more diverse people into the boardrooms of football clubs and businesses. We have these fantastic leaders. They've learnt leadership in their careers. And what happens to footballers normally is they drop off the end of the cliff and they disappear if they're not top pundits. Surely we can use these people in leadership roles in the game. Surely we can. So we put this corporate governance scheme together, delivered by Professor Carl George, a corporate governance specialist. We've now had 6 cohorts go through that. Chris Hewton's been on the course, Rachel Yankee's been on the course. Who else? Wes Morgan has just graduated from the course just now. The late Ugo Ekiog came through the course. What it does is it kind of helps to address that issue, But also it gives all of these guys who've gone to do different roles a better understanding of how a football club works from top to bottom. Sports People's Think Tank, I know I'm involved in something else. I like founding things. Basically, we looked at the lack of black managers in football, the lack of black coaches. 5 minutes, thank you. The lack of black managers and coaches. I think at the moment we've got 5 black managers across 92 clubs, 1 in 3 players, uncomfortable dynamic, right? So we thought, what can we do? Well, we worked with Loughborough University to actually analyse the figures. Where are those players? Where are those coaches and managers in the football structure? Academy level, first team level. And from that, the Sports People's Think Tank looked at suggestions on what the game should be doing. Should we have a Rooney Rule? The Sports People Think Tank thinks we should. Should we be doing more around, encouraging and educating players coming out of the game from minority backgrounds to consider coaching? That's what we think we should be doing. So we put those recommendations to the game. We have done for like 4 reports now. We've got our final report out later on in the year. We've presented them at Parliament. And in that time, we've made some good progress, or we've certainly contributed to that. The English Football League now have introduced a version of the Rooney Rule, which is mandatory at academy level and has had some great success. At first team level in the EFL, it is a voluntary code that every single club follows. So we've had some success. We've come together, we've campaigned. This is athlete activism, which I've helped to facilitate with some very forward-thinking people. So here we go. We've got Kelly Southerton is now part of our group because we're looking at moving beyond football. It is the Sports People's Think Tank. What other issues are there that athletes could come together and lobby sport on? What's it like for a woman who's an athlete, goes away, has a baby and comes back from maternity leave? How are they supported? Can athletes play a role in making sure they are supported in a more thorough and better way? Can athletes have a unified voice? Because what we identified was that was missing. Despite there being really good work being done by unions, actually there was a voice that was missing for an independent body of athletes across sports. So anyway, I know I've got 5 minutes, so I'm going to make this in about 2. My advice to you today is, as journalists, as people moving into the sports media, seek new information. Seek new information. I think sometimes this gets lost. I read pieces and they're regurgitated from something else. It's not new information. You should really be passionate about new information in whatever you're doing. New ways to do things if you're interested more in the technical side of how you kind of move forward. Be prepared. For these interviews, I remember I would sit in my hotel room and go over my notes all day feeling nervous as hell. I know I'm prepared when I have that feeling. I almost feel like I want to throw up before I go and do an interview, a post-match, or go in for a big interview, because I'm worried about what I might miss. But you have a confidence when you're prepared that you put it all out there. You're not going to do it again, so be as prepared as you can be. Believe in yourself. I struggled with a real lack of belief as a young person, a massive lack of belief. I'd sit and not ask a question, and then have someone else ask the question that I was going to ask later on in the session, and I think, but I had that question, but I was too scared to ask the question. So you have to believe in yourself, have that confidence. It might feel like a stupid question sometimes, but actually sometimes you'll get the best answers because it is a good question, but you just need to believe in yourself. And also be yourself. I see this so much. Everyone wants to be the next Dan Walker. Everybody wants to be the next Gary Lineker. Guess what? You're not going to be. You're going to be the first you. And when you try and imitate someone else, it is so transparent. It is obvious. You cannot be them. When Dan Walker's walking around the BBC office, what you see on screen is what you get from him. He used to host all the quizzes and stuff, and that was way before he had his big break in TV, and everybody knew. They were like, this geezer's going to be a superstar. So it is no surprise that he is flying as high as he is right now and will continue to fly. But that's because he's himself. Gary Lineker has a particular style. Dan Walker has a particular style. You will have a particular way of doing what you do. Believe in yourself. Believe that you are good enough and what you bring to the table is going to actually serve this industry really well. Be the change, and I know I'm being wrapped up now. I'm being wrapped up. This is normally someone saying, shut up, we're going to drop off air. There's going to be a big black hole. We're not going to get the adverts away. Value diversity. Challenge your bosses respectfully. Sometimes when there is an issue, people have a problem where they get emotional about a situation, which is understandable, and they challenge like that. One of the best bits of advice I've ever had was from Garth Crooks. He said, Leon, if you have a problem and you want to bring it to a boss, make sure in this hand you have the solution. Because bosses have got loads of problems. They're dealing with problems day to day, all the time. But if you have a problem, bring that solution. Talk through that solution. What is that solution to the problem? How are you going to be part of delivering that? So think about that. And that might be, you have a frustration with a story. Someone doesn't see the value in the story. Well, actually, this is why it's a good story. This is how I'm going to do it. This is how we're going to make it work. You need to bring those solutions. And stay true to your own values. You know, you all have your own values. Please stay true to them. Don't move away from them to try and get on in your career. You won't feel good about it, and ultimately you'll look back on those decisions as bad decisions. So please stay true to your values. And good luck. Good luck. Good luck in what you're doing. And thank you very much for listening. Thank you.
We're going to save questions for the panel, so hopefully you'll stay for that, because we've had to wrap up now. It's about 10 minutes till the next talk, so if you want a quick break, then you have to come back in and sign in.